Welcome to Now Go Lead, the podcast where we help you level up your leadership in just 5 minutes. Each episode, we provide inspiring stories and actionable insights to help you lead with confidence and clarity. Whether you're a seasoned leader or just starting out, our goal is to give you the tools and motivation to level up your leadership game. Let's talk about some familiar voices. I'll go ahead and tell you today, this is going to be a little bit longer of a post than we've done previously, but there's some good information here, so I encourage you to stick with me and let's learn a little bit about some of these voices. I want you to think for a minute about your process when you're considering a big decision in life. We have really so much information available to us, more than any humans in history, that really can help us make decisions about what hairbrush to buy or what pair of shoes, and it can easily involve hours of research. And that's nothing compared to buying a car, choosing a vacation, or whatever it may be. But for many of us, the greater the decision, or the more difficult or challenging, or maybe the more the decision has the possibility to change our life, the more likely we are to engage not just the reviews or the technical parts, but just getting our heart and soul involved in the process. And what we really want to do sometimes is have someone beside us. This is when we go to people we know, people we trust, and people that are within our sphere of influence to help us make this decision. And I call these inputs voices. I mean, these are the voices we allow into our life. And, we're going to trust them a lot of times more than just the facts or figures. And, on my own journey, I've learned a few things about listening to these voices. A lot of times, even though they're well-intended, they're there as my friend or as my encourager, they can sometimes create more confusion than clarity. So I thought I would maybe share some of these voices because I found over time that they are common to a lot of leaders, common to a lot of people. And, if you listen to the wrong voice, it can really have a difficult impact on your leadership. So understanding these voices and identifying them can be a really key skill for the leader as we're moving along in the journey. All right, so let's take a look at the first voice. I'll just call it, I called it, for lack of a better way of putting it, the voice of the rah-rah. And you all have these people in your life, friends, that will cheer you up. That is their greatest joy in life, is to cheer you up. And they can be really comforting when we're navigating a tough decision. We can go to them, get immediate validation for whatever we're feeling in the moment. If we want to go right, they're like, yeah. If we want to go left, yeah, well, let's do that. And if, for no other reason, I think these voices can encourage, they can encourage us to move forward with an important decision, even when it may be difficult. But here the rub is that what's easy and right are a lot of times not the same thing. And the voice of the rah-rah will usually encourage us to do what's easy or best as the primary goal, because that means we will feel better or happy. I mean, you've probably seen this play out before. A man goes to his twice divorced single buddy to get advice about it at a low point in his marriage. He knows he's going to have someone in his corner and maybe even feed his feelings of anger with a sense of righteousness. Buddy may say, hey, you deserve to be happy, and this clearly isn't making you happy. And, it may well be that the man and his wife have an irreparable situation, but the voice of the rah-rah is rarely going to come in and offer a dissenting view or encourage you to look at something from a different point of view. But as a good leader of people, you just need to be careful when listening to the voice of the rah-rah. It can feel good for someone to tell you, and you can indulge these voices for a minute, and occasionally you're going to need it. But the true leader always serves for the greater good, even when the rah-rah would tell him to leave it all behind. Okay, next one is the voice of justice. I think every one of us has an innate sense of justice. It's built into the fiber of the human soul. It's, when we're coming from a place of hurt, a lot of times that we seek this voice. Someone we care about has wounded us. Maybe there's a situation at work where you were miscast, misrepresented. Sometimes just the unfairness of life seems to hit us at the wrong time. And we want justice so bad. I know you've been there. And this voice stirs us to action. A lot of times this voice is represented, I see it represented on social media pretty loudly. Anybody, anywhere who's just been relegated, subjugated, pushed to the side, they can create a banner on social media that says, justice, look at what happened to me. Where's my justice? And let's take up this fight together. So justice, I think arguably is a good thing, but when can the voice of justice be a hindrance in your leadership? I think we go wrong with this voice when we operate under the premise that justice is the goal, that it is something that is absolutely and in all circumstances deserved. If you think about the accounts of the gospel, Jesus had a pretty loyal group of followers. And the night before he died, a group of Jewish leaders came up to arrest him. And as the accusers were walking up to him, one of Jesus' followers, he pulled out a sword and in an act of righteous anger, he cut off the ear of one of the men. And Jesus said, whoa, let's not do this. There's a right time and place for justice, but sometimes there's time for sacrifice. And I think the core tenet of the voice of justice is to be fair, be reasonable, and that seems to make sense. But there's often very little cultural resource when we act in the pursuit of justice as well. The true leader, though, understands that we can act justly in our own organization and with our everyday behavior, but we cannot demand justice in our own journey. Justice is more something that we give and not something that we demand from others. And so when it comes to decision making, don't let the voice of justice turn your heart away from the pursuit of the vision. That's a challenging one. It really is. Okay, this is the tough one. I call this the unspoken voice. This is a voice we like to hear from in the greatest moments of the greatest decisions of our life. And it's the voice of the higher power. Depending on what you call this, and may believe about your existence, it could be the voice of God, could be the etheric voice of the universe or the voice of nature, but we all experience some familiarity with this voice. And the thing is, even though we're familiar with it, it's often the most difficult to hear clearly. And if we get it wrong, it can really take us off path. When we share life with someone, when you share life with someone, close friend, a spouse, or whatever, those voices become a great comfort to us. And at some point, they no longer need to announce themselves. You can hear a voice in another room and you will immediately know who it belongs to. Really, when we hear a specific voice, we can be certain about what it is just based on our level of familiarity. If you're familiar with someone, you will know that voice. You don't have to have the visual cue to go with it. You know what it is. And you know this. I mean, if some stranger walked in and just called out from behind you saying that they were your spouse, you would know. I mean, you don't, it's that built in. And so a lot of times when leaders or people tell me that they're hearing from God or hearing from a higher power, and what I really know about them is that they really don't spend a lot of time learning or knowing the voice of God. They spend most of their time on social media, or they spend most of their time on listening to the voice of the rah-rah, then you can get kind of skeptical about that. And that voice becomes maybe not something that you really should be relying on if you're not familiar with what that voice is. Now, that's not to say that God can't speak to someone in a moment and direct them to the right path. That certainly happens, but it makes more sense that the more you spend time trying to hear the voice of God, voice of nature, whatever that may be for you, that you're going to know when it speaks to you. You can't just expect to know that voice in a moment when you haven't been training yourself to do so. And as I was writing the article and just doing a little research about voices, this is interesting. I came across a video of a group of sheep grazing in a field. I think it was over in Europe somewhere. And one by one, they had these people would come up and step up to the fence, and they would say this phrase. I can't remember exactly what it was, but they would say this specific phrase, and they would yell it out at the sheep, and the sheep just would not pay attention. They're like, we're not, going to pay attention to you, whatever. But About third or fourth person came up was the actual shepherd. It was that person that was taking care of those sheep day in and day out. And he said the very same word. It didn't sound a whole lot different to me, but as soon as he called them, they stopped what they were doing and they ran toward the end. As a casual observer and someone with no familiarity with any of the voices in that video, it really didn't make sense to me. But to the sheep, it made all the difference. Everyone else was just background noise. And I'm really struck by the fact that even though the words were the same, the sheep didn't move until they heard the right voice. I mean, there's something there. Following through on the right command from the wrong voice can lead to big problems. It can mean you move at the wrong time. It can mean you move towards the goal and right into a trap. I mean, we've heard about wolf in sheep's clothing, right? I mean, that's exactly what this is. And I'm reminded here at this point in the discussion that I'm kind of pivoting around an idea that I haven't really brought forward yet, and that's that there are a lot of voices out there who are trying to deceive you. There really are. And some of them are from within your very own heart, and that should frighten you. It should frighten you to know that sometimes you're trying to listen to the right voice and you're trying to listen to those things that might be trying to speak to you, but you can even deceive yourself sometimes. It's super important. So for the leader, when and if you choose to seek the voice of God in a moment of decision, proceed with caution. If you start paying attention just to the first voice that pops into your head, how do you know if it's the right voice? I mean, you're only going to know this if you spent quiet time listening, moments, hours, meditation, and you got to do that regularly, just like you would with someone you want to get to know well. Once you get to know that voice, it's a whole lot easier to listen to it when it comes to you. And maybe just let me say one more final thought on this idea of the unspoken voice. It's my experience that the voice of God is neither impatient or mercurial. The voice is not going to tell you one thing one day and something different the other. It's consistent and it's patient. And a good sign that you're probably hearing the right voice is that you continue to get a consistent message over a reasonable period of time. And that voice of God, in my mind, often operates outside my own sense of urgency. It's not my timing that's going to make this. And I can take confidence in knowing that if it's right, it's going to be right tomorrow and it's going to be right the day after that. So, all right. Next one is the voice of circumstances, or as I like to call it, the voice that's not a voice. How many times have you heard someone say, life is telling me something? Or the cosmos seems to be lining this path up for me. I mean, is it even possible to tell the difference between coincidence and divine? Is it even possible to know the difference between normal coincidence and divine alignment? I've known people who built their entire infrastructure for decision making based on their perceived alignment of circumstances. And I guess maybe even as I'm saying this, I'm a little conflicted about where to go with this as it relates to leadership. Because on one hand, I believe that a lot of times in life, circumstances are aligned to work towards our good. And we have to pay attention to those movements in life. When you have clear perspective and you're tuned into the path and the journey, you can easily sense when the moments are lining up and you have to be ready to act quickly. But I think there's an entirely different situation when we want to see something in our circumstances. When we're searching for clarity in a moment of darkness, emotional distress. And I think the question begs to be asked here is, when we are in a moment of change or uncertainty, how do we fight the urge for answers or a way out when really the right answer might be to be patient for a little bit? I mean, I don't care how old you are, how many times you've been through a tough situation. The fight or flight instincts are always going to be there when we feel threatened and when we're feeling insecure, uncomfortable. And the last thing any of us want to do is stay in that spot. And there is an innate urge to want to get out of it. But, patience must prevail, especially in leadership and in those difficult moments. In crisis, in uncertainty, our reaction a lot of times is to move towards clarity and solution. And I think we have to be aware as a leader when our emotions are driving us to look for solutions when there may not be any. Sometimes that's not going to happen. And I think the voice of circumstances can sometimes sound like a true manifestation, really, of our desire to hear a voice. Have you ever seen or heard stories of people walking in the desert and they describe mirages off in the front, and and they get there only to realize it was just a trick of their eye and a manifestation of what they really want to see. The voice of circumstance can be tricky. It can be tricky to hear and even more difficult to interpret. And my experience is that this is an unreliable voice as a lone source for information, but it can become a very compelling voice when it's adding to some of the other things and voices that are lining up that you're hearing truth and clarity through. You know, if you're having a bad day at the office and you get a notification that evening that there's an open job opportunity across town, that doesn't necessarily mean it's time to make a big change. Truth is, you have bad days at work all the time, and there are always job opportunities. Just because those two things happen on the same day doesn't mean that it's time to go. But, you know, over a season of time, if you're starting to feel a sense of calling to a new position and you've gotten some wise advice from friends and taken some time to reflect, and maybe, just maybe, the voice of circumstance is adding some beautiful background harmony to these other voices coming in. All right, the cacophony. This is the myriad of other voices that seem to hit our ears in our weakest moments. The real discipline for the leader is to filter out the wrong voices, because there's going to be plenty of those. And we have to be able to hear the true voices and patient enough to wait for a combination of truth and circumstances. So think about this for a moment. Life's full of trouble. Every relationship, every job, any creative endeavor you've ever undertaken has had problems. Some are big, some are small. And the point of listening to the right voices in your life is not to completely escape problems or avoid the situations. If that was the case, there would be no sense of consistency in our lives. You've probably seen leaders like this. They always seem to be making radical decisions that are difficult to understand, and they don't fall into the category of reasonable. But we have to stay calm, and that is a reflection of our wisdom in our leadership, and ultimately can really think of no greater quality for a leader to possess. So take 5 minutes and consider, what are the familiar voices that you're letting into your life? Are you spending time learning to recognize the right voices? Do you have the discipline to tune out the channels of rah-rah and deceit? And are you patient enough with your leadership to allow the voices and circumstances to help provide you the clarity in the decision-making process? Having said all that, understand that sometimes you're just going to make the wrong decision. You'll hear the wrong voice. You'll pay attention to the wrong voice and make a bad decision. That's okay too. We're never all going to get it right all the time, but progress on the journey is much easier when we learn how to listen to the right voices. So it's time to now go lead. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Now Go Lead. Join us next week as we cover a brand new leadership topic and help you level up your leadership in just 5 minutes. For more resources, tips, and inspiration, visit our website at nowgolead.com. You can also connect with us on Instagram at nowgolead and on LinkedIn. We would love to hear from you. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your feedback helps us grow and reach more leaders like you. Also, don't forget to share this podcast with your colleagues and friends who are on their own leadership journey. Now Go Lead is produced by HP Engineering Studios in beautiful Northwest Arkansas. Now go lead.